Imagine a massive movie screen. On it plays the most heartbreaking tragedy. A blazing fire, a chaotic, raging war. The screen holds all of it. Yet when the movie ends and the projector clicks off, the screen is completely untouched. It is unburned. It is unbroken. What if that screen is exactly what you are? What if your true nature is this infinite, silent awareness, holding the entire chaotic drama of your life, yet remaining perfectly free, perfectly at peace, no matter what happens on the surface?
Wow. Yeah, that demands pretty much a complete collapse of everything we assume about our own identity.
It really does. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking Chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is traditionally known as Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, or Wisdom in Action.
Right.
And we're drawing from an incredible synthesis of thought today. We're heavily featuring the extensive lecture series by Swami Sarvapriyananda, but we're also bringing in the classical dualistic interpretations of Sri Madhvacharya, who is also known as Sri Rayaru.
Which is a fantastic contrast to have.
Definitely. The goal here is to help you navigate what might be the ultimate spiritual paradox, finding the absolute unshakable peace of a silent ascetic while being fully engaged, fiercely active, and incredibly busy in the modern world.
And that is exactly what this specific chapter is engineered to do. It takes the highest, most abstract philosophical realization, and it just forces it directly into the machinery of daily high-stakes action.
And it wastes absolutely no time doing so. Let's look at how Krishna opens this chapter. He immediately presents this massive chronological anomaly.
Right out of the gate.
Right. He casually mentions that he taught this exact same science of yoga to Vivasvan, the sun god, at the very beginning of creation. Vivasvan then passed it to Manu, the ancient progenitor of humanity, and down through a lineage of royal sages. Now, Arjuna has a sharp, highly logical mind. He immediately flags this. He says, essentially, wait, you and I are contemporaries. We were born in this current era. The sun god is an ancient cosmic entity. So how is it ontologically possible that you instructed him at the dawn of time?
Arjuna's question is the necessary catalyst for one of the most significant theological reveals in the text. This is the moment Krishna pulls back the curtain on his own nature and establishes the doctrine of the avatar, the divine incarnation.
Right.
To really grasp the implications of Krishna teaching the sun god, we have to forensically examine the difference between a jiva, which is an ordinary bound soul like you or me, and an avatar.
But doesn't an avatar inhabit a physical body just like a jiva? I mean, they bleed, they eat, they sleep. What is the actual structural difference in their manifestation?
The difference lies entirely in the cause and the binding power of the birth. For a jiva, birth is an involuntary reaction. You are propelled into a specific body in a specific environment by the immense accumulated pressure of your past karma and your foundational ignorance of avidya.
So it's not a choice.
Not at all. You don't consciously select your parents, your genetic predispositions, or the historical era of your birth. You're pushed onto the stage of life to exhaust the results of past actions and to fulfill unquenched desires.
We are essentially trapped in a cosmic mechanism of cause and effect.
Precisely. The avatar, however, bypasses this mechanism entirely. When the divine incarnates, there is no accumulated karma forcing the issue. There is no unfulfilled desire.
Okay.
The descent of the avatar is an act of absolute unconditioned freedom, a principle known in Sanskrit as swatantriya. The divine utilizes its own creative illusory power, its maya, to project a physical form into the space-time continuum. The jiva is bound by maya. The avatar is the master of maya.
That actually brings to mind that brilliant distinction Swami Vivekananda makes. He categorized the manifested universe into two types of creation.
Oh, right. The machine-made versus handcrafted.
Exactly. On one side, you have the machine-made products. That includes us, our bodies, the flora and fauna, the planetary systems. We are all rolled off the relentless assembly line of Prakriti, of material nature governed by karma.
And on the other side?
The custom handcrafted creations, the avatar.
Yeah.
These are beings who are deliberately, consciously fashioned by the divine to enter the timeline. They are bespoke interventions. And because they aren't bound by the amnesia that comes with a karma-driven birth, they retain total omniscience.
Which Krishna states plainly.
Right. He says, many births have passed for me and for you also. I remember them all. You do not.
That amnesia is a crucial point. For the jiva, forgetting past lives is actually a mercy of nature. If we remembered the infinite accumulation of our past traumas, attachments, and deaths, the psychological weight would completely paralyze us.
It would be unbearable.
Exactly. But the avatar, being untouched by the trauma of karma, holds the entirety of time in their awareness without suffering.
But if the avatar has absolutely no karma to exhaust and no desires to fulfill, why undergo the immense friction of taking on a human body? Why subject that boundless consciousness to the politics, the betrayals, and the physical limitations of human existence?
Krishna provides the architectural blueprint for divine intervention in verses 7 and 8, the famous yada yada hi dharmasya verses. He states that whenever there is a catastrophic decline in dharma righteousness, cosmic order and spiritual truth, and a corresponding surge in dharma, the divine projects itself into the visible world. But the purpose is highly specific, and it operates on 3 distinct levels.
Let's break those 3 levels down, because I think there's a really common misconception that God incarnates to solve our material problems, to cure a plague or stop a famine or fix a broken political system.
The material world is a realm of duality that will always have friction. The avatar's first and most paramount mission is paratranaya sadhunam, the protection of the good, specifically the advanced spiritual seekers.
Notice the priority there.
Exactly. The primary reason the infinite becomes finite is not social engineering. It is to grant liberation moksha to those highly evolved practitioners who have exhausted worldly desires and are simply waiting, perhaps across multiple lifetimes, for the final grace of realization. The avatar provides that ultimate liberating contact.
So the entire drama of an incarnation, the epic battles, the massive societal shifts, is almost a secondary byproduct. The main event is answering the call of the few who are ready to wake up from the illusion entirely.
Yes, the universe is viewed as an educational system for the soul. When the highest tier of students is ready to graduate, the headmaster arrives.
That is a great way to put it.
The second purpose, then, is the reformation or destruction of the wicked. And we must understand destruction through a spiritual lens. It often means destroying the wickedness within the individual, neutralizing the forces that are actively preventing others from pursuing spiritual evolution.
And the third purpose?
To firmly reestablish Dharma. The avatar arrives during epochs of deep spiritual cynicism, when the culture has collapsed into pure materialism, when the texts are treated as mere mythology, and when the very idea of a transcendent reality is mocked.
Which sounds pretty familiar.
Right, that avatar doesn't just deliver a new philosophy lecture. Their very biological existence, their presence, forcefully proves that the spiritual reality is the foundation of the material world. They reset the spiritual compass of humanity for the next epoch.
Okay, so with that cosmic authority firmly established, Krishna moves from theology into the raw mechanics of consciousness. And he delivers a verse that sounds like an impossible Zen koan.
Verse 4.12.
Yes, and it is the absolute fulcrum of this entire deep dive. He says, "He who sees inaction in action and action in action is wise among humans."
It is the ultimate riddle of Vedanta.
On its face, it sounds contradictory. How do you perform an action while doing nothing? If I'm sitting at my computer furiously typing out a report, or if I'm physically lifting weights, there is undeniable action. Are we just playing semantic games here, redefining the word action?
Not at all. To decode this riddle, we have to adopt the rigorous framework of Advaita Vedanta, the philosophy of non-dualism. We have to draw an absolute impenetrable line between 2 categories of existence: the true self, known as the Atman, and the not-self, known as the Anatma.
The confusion of human existence entirely stems from blurring this line.
Yes. So let's define the territory of the not-self first, because I think most people will find that everything they consider to be them actually falls into this category.
Okay, let's do it.
The Anatma, the not-self, encompasses all matter and all phenomenal experience. It is your physical body, but it is also your mind, your intellect, your passing emotions, your memories, and your ego. The localized sense of being John or Sarah.
So even the mind is considered matter.
In Vedantic psychology, the mind is just subtle matter. And because the not-self is material, it is inherently subject to modification. It grows, it decays, it desires, it suffers, and most importantly, it acts. All action happens strictly within the domain of the not-self.
Which leaves the true self, the Atman. If the mind and the ego are the not-self, what exactly is left?
Pure unconditioned awareness, the silent witness. The Atman is the illuminating consciousness that simply observes the activities of the mind and body. And the radical truth that solves Krishna's riddle is this: the Atman is structurally incapable of action.
Because it's infinite.
Exactly. It cannot move because it is all-pervading. Where would it move to? It cannot desire because it is entirely whole. It cannot change. Therefore, it never acts.
Let's ground this with the fireflies analogy, because trying to picture pure awareness can really leave the mind spinning.
It's a great visual.
So imagine standing in a completely dark field at night. Suddenly, fireflies begin to flash. They light up, they dart to the left, they dart to the right, and then they fade out. The fireflies are your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations. They're in constant frantic motion.
Right.
But the darkness, the space in which the fireflies appear, does not move. It doesn't flinch when a firefly flashes. It just holds the space. The space is the Atman. The fireflies are the Anatman.
Or consider the hook we opened with, the movie screen. Screen is the substrate. A film is projected onto it. The film might depict a terrifying tsunami, a burning city, or a chaotic battlefield. The characters on the screen are running, fighting, acting.
But what is the screen doing?
Absolutely nothing. It remains perfectly still, untouched by the water, unburned by the fire. The screen is the true self. The tragic or victorious movie is the activity of your body and mind.
So when Krishna says the wise person sees inaction in action, he means they are operating in the world with the constant, unbroken realization that they are the screen.
Yes.
Their body might be fighting a battle, their mind might be solving a complex logistical problem, but their core awareness remains in a state of absolute untouched stillness. They recognize the total inaction of the true self, right in the midst of a whirlwind of physical and mental action.
Yes. And the second half of the riddle, seeing action in inaction, addresses the trap of false renunciation. You can take an unenlightened person, strip them of all their possessions, and force them to sit completely motionless in a remote Himalayan cave.
Physically, there is profound inaction.
But what is happening internally? Their mind is likely boiling with repressed desires, anxieties, resentment, and the egoic pride of being an ascetic. The wise person looks at that physical stillness and sees the intense binding action of the turbulent mind.
But if I truly realize that I am the silent screen, and that my true self does nothing what stops me from falling into complete apathy, why would I bother to excel at my job or help a friend or participate in society if it's all just a movie playing on the not-self?
That is the most common and frankly most dangerous misunderstanding of non-dualism. It assumes that the only valid motivation for action is personal gain.
Right.
To understand why the enlightened person acts, we have to contrast their psychology with ours. When we act, we are almost always acting out of a sense of lack. We feel structurally incomplete.
We believe that if we acquire the right salary, the right partner, the right social status, we will finally patch the hole in our being. We act for fulfillment.
And because those external things are part of the not-self, part of the changing material world, they eventually decay or change, and the hole opens up again.
It never lasts.
It is a mathematical impossibility to achieve infinite peace by accumulating finite things. But the enlightened person, having realized their identity as the infinite Atman, is already complete. They are nitya tripta, eternally satisfied.
So they don't need the world to provide them with peace.
Therefore, when they act from a place of fulfillment, not for fulfillment. Their actions become an overflow of their own completeness, manifesting as spontaneous compassion, the upholding of societal order, and the uplifting of others.
This beautifully highlights why escaping our circumstances rarely brings peace. There is an analogy regarding a dog that perfectly captures the futility of trying to manipulate the external world to solve an internal problem of ignorance.
Ah, the dog with the fleas. It is an unsparing look at the human condition.
It really is. So imagine a street dog. This dog is covered in fleas. When it walks out into the hot midday sun, the heat aggravates the fleas and they start biting fiercely. The dog is in agony. To escape the torment, the dog spots a cool, dark, isolated cave and runs inside. The darkness and the cool air cause the fleas to go dormant. The dog feels a moment of immense relief. But this dog also suffers from parasites inside its brain. And the moment the dog sits in the quiet, isolated, dark line, the brain parasites wake up and start biting from the inside, driving the dog completely mad.
It is an excruciating situation.
Desperate to escape the internal torment, the dog runs back out of the cave into the bright, noisy world. The stimulation quiets the brain parasites, but the sun wakes up the fleas and they start biting again. The dog is trapped in a perpetual cycle, running back and forth between the painful sun and the tormenting cave.
And this is exactly how we live when we lack self-knowledge. The fleas represent the friction of engaging with the world, the demanding boss, the financial stress, the relationship conflicts, the sheer noise of society.
When the external pressure gets too high, we think the solution is physical isolation. We go on a silent retreat or we quit our jobs to move to the woods. We run into the cave.
But when we get to the woods, the brain parasites wake up. The unresolved ego, the loneliness, the subtle anxieties, the fear of missing out. The mind turns on itself because it has nothing external to chew on.
So we abandon the retreat, run back into the busy world to distract ourselves, and the fleas start biting all over again.
The enlightened person has transcended both. By realizing the true self, they have cured the brain parasites of ignorance and ego. And because their inner state is independent of external conditions, the fleas of worldly friction no longer touch their core being. They
Wow.
can sit in absolute sensory-deprived isolation and experience total joy. Or they can stand in the middle of a chaotic stock exchange floor or a literal battlefield and experience that exact same unblemished joy.
Swami Vivekananda described this state as intense action combined with eternal peace. He said you must learn to work like a master, not as a slave. Your mind and body can be operating at absolute maximum capacity, burning like a blast furnace to achieve a goal while your inner being rests in the eternal unmoving calmness of the Himalayan snows.
Achieving that state, however, requires a profound cognitive shift in how we view the mundane activities of our lives. We have to erase the artificial boundary we've drawn between the secular and the spiritual.
And Krishna does exactly this in verse 24, which introduces a vision that radically transforms how we interact with the physical world.
Let's get into verse 24.
It begins with the chant, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavi. For anyone who has spent time in India or in a traditional ashram setting, this verse is deeply familiar. It is chanted before meals, functioning essentially as a Vedic grace.
But treating it just as a nice prayer to say before eating a bowl of rice is doing it a massive disservice. It is the absolute zenith of philosophical vision.
It uses the imagery of an ancient Vedic fire, sacrifice a yajna, to dismantle our perception of reality. The verse translates roughly to the act of offering is Brahman. The oblation, the offering itself, is Brahman. By Brahman is it poured into the fire of Brahman. Brahman verily shall be reached by him who always sees Brahman in action.
Let's define Brahman here for clarity. In Advaita Vedanta, Brahman is the ultimate non-dual reality. It is the infinite, undivided consciousness that is the ground of all existence. So in this verse breaks down the components of an action, is making a staggering ontological claim.
It is systematically deconstructing the subject-object duality.
Exactly. Normally, when you perform an action, you experience four distinct elements. There's the instrument you are using, like a ladle in a sacrifice or a laptop in an office. There's the object you are manipulating, the clarified butter or the data. There is the receptacle, the fire or the company. And there is you, the agent, performing the action.
We see these as four entirely separate entities.
But this verse says no. The ladle is consciousness. The butter is consciousness. The fire is consciousness. And the person pouring it is consciousness. It's all just Brahman interacting with Brahman.
Think of a goldsmith's shop. You look into the display case and see a golden ring, a golden necklace, and a golden bracelet. They have different names, different shapes, and different functional uses. But if you ask the goldsmith what is actually in the case, he will say it's all just gold. The names and forms are temporary superimposed realities. The underlying substance is one. The enlightened mind looks at the entire universe, every mundane task, every physical object, every waking, dreaming, and deep sleep state, and sees only the singular substance of Brahman.
Now, it is absolutely vital here that we examine this verse through another lens, because this text has been debated by some of the greatest minds in history. We have to look at the dualistic interpretations, specifically from the commentary of Sri Madhvacharya, the founder of the Vedanta school.
Yes, because he looks at this exact same verse and extracts a completely different, yet equally profound spiritual practice.
Right. Madhvacharya approaches the text with a rigorous grammatical and theological critique of non-dualism. His philosophy insists on a fundamental eternal distinction between the individual soul, the jiva, and the Supreme Lord Ishvara.
Therefore, the idea that the ladle, the butter, and the human being are literally the exact same substance as God is, from his perspective, a category error.
So how does he translate Brahmahavi if he rejects the idea that the offering is Brahman?
He focuses on the compound nature of the Sanskrit words. Instead of translating Brahmahavi as an equation, he interprets it as Brahmani plus Havi. Grammatically, this shifts the meaning from identity to possession.
So the sacrifice, the offering, the action, it doesn't become the Lord, it belongs to the Lord.
That is a subtle but massive paradigm shift. It turns philosophy into deep demotion.
Entirely. In the divided view, you are not realizing that you are the infinite. You are realizing your true position as the eternal servant, the child, or the instrument of the supreme controller.
Every action you take is no longer yours. It is a profound act of submission. The mundane world isn't an illusion of Brahman. It is the property of God, and your interaction with it must reflect that supreme reverence.
Both of these interpretations, whether you are seeing every element of your spreadsheet analysis as a manifestation of one non-dual consciousness, or you are offering the results of that analysis entirely to the divine to achieve the exact same practical result. They completely obliterate the mundane nature of the work.
They transform binding karma into liberating yoga.
Exactly.
You don't need to quit your job in finance or leave your family or move to a monastery to live a life of total spiritual absorption. That is the old paradigm of physical renunciation. Krishna is demanding a cognitive renunciation.
And the sources share incredible historical examples of masters who embodied this.
Hmm.
Take Sri Sarada Devi, the Holy Mother. After her husband, the great mystic Sri Ramakrishna, passed away, she didn't retreat to a cave.
She lived for decades in a crowded household, performing the most exhausting, repetitive, frankly unglamorous chores imaginable. Cooking, cleaning, mediating petty family squabbles.
From the outside, it was the definition of the mundane grind.
Yet she was universally recognized as an entity of supreme spiritual realization. She famously stated, "I do not know what sorrow is." She didn't suffer the friction of the household because every act of sweeping the floor or cooking a meal was an act of profound spiritual communion.
Or look at Nisargadatta Maharaj. He wasn't sitting under a banyan tree in a pristine forest. He lived in the noisy, polluted, hyperdense slums of Mumbai.
He ran a tiny shop selling hand-rolled beedies, dealing with commerce customers, and survival in a major metropolis.
Yet seekers flew from all over the globe to sit in the loft above his shop because his state of cosmic awareness was absolute.
They proved that the environment is entirely secondary, but we have to be realistic here. You can't just intellectually decide, okay, from today onward, my commute in traffic is Brahmin and expect it to magically work.
The mind is far too unruly for that. It will rebel.
Which is why Krishna immediately follows the grand vision of verse 24 with a detailed practical manual on how to train the mind to actually hold that vision. Starting in verse 25, he outlines the path of sacrifice, taking traditional rituals and expanding them into psychological disciplines.
The text enumerates roughly 12 different types of yajnas, or sacrifices. Krishna takes the concept of offering butter into a physical fire and turns it inward. For example, he mentions those who offer their wealth as a sacrifice through disciplined charity.
He describes those who practice pranayama, the rigorous control of the vital breath, sacrificing the outgoing breath into the incoming breath. He mentions the sacrifice of sense enjoyment, where practitioners rigorously restrict their diet.
But if everything is just an illusion of the mind, or if the true self doesn't act, why impose such rigid, difficult physical and mental disciplines? It seems almost contradictory. Why not just relax into the awareness?
Because an unprepared mind cannot hold the awareness. To illustrate why discipline is mandatory, the commentaries use the brilliant analogy of the storm-blown crow.
I love this imagery.
Picture a crow that has been caught outside during a violent, chaotic hurricane. The winds have battered it, the rain has soaked it. After the storm finally passes, you see this crow sitting on a tree branch. It is a wreck.
Its feathers are sticking out at bizarre angles. It is shivering, its eyes are darting around. It is completely disheveled and scattered.
That crow is the exact state of the modern human mind. We are constantly battered by the hurricane of sensory overload, algorithmic manipulation, deep-seated anxieties, and relentless desires. Our attention is fractured into 1,000 different directions.
A mind in that state cannot possibly perceive the subtle, silent reality of the true self. It's just too noisy.
So what do these disciplines, the controlled diet, the breath work, the regulation of wealth, actually do?
They act as a stabilizing anchor.
Right.
They force the mind to gather its scattered energy. When you consciously restrict your diet or control your breath, you are exercising a veto power over your primal impulses.
You are smoothing out the feathers of the storm-blown crow. You are building the requisite concentration.
And it is worth noting the deeply practical side of this. As the textual notes point out, the sacrifice of regulating food intake isn't just an esoteric spiritual practice. It is highly preventative medicine.
You cannot engage in deep meditation if your body is ravaged by lifestyle diseases caused by uncontrolled consumption. Physical discipline creates the biological platform necessary for spiritual inquiry.
But Krishna makes it very clear that these physical and mental disciplines are just the scaffolding. They are not the building itself. In verse 33, he elevates the entire discussion.
He says knowledge as a sacrifice is superior to sacrifices performed with material things. All actions in their entirety, Arjuna, culminate in knowledge.
The ultimate practice is the Jnana Yajna, the knowledge sacrifice. Because all the breath control in the world won't liberate you if it doesn't eventually lead to the realization of who you are.
The disciplines purify the mirror of the mind so that it can finally reflect the true self.
There is a metaphor used in the lectures that perfectly captures why this knowledge is the only thing that ultimately matters. It compares the journey of the soul to reading a massive, multi-volume encyclopedia.
Every single page in this book represents an entire human lifetime. You are born, you live a life, you build a career, you fall in love, you suffer heartbreak, you accumulate wealth, you grow old, and then you die. You turn the page.
And you begin again.
What is the point of reading this endless book? It isn't to collect the paper. When you turn the page, you don't get to take your bank account with you. You don't take your academic degrees. You don't even take your specific memories or your personality traits.
The only thing you extract from the text, the only thing that carries over from lifetime to lifetime, is the distilled spiritual knowledge and maturity you have acquired.
That knowledge is the sole evolutionary metric of the soul.
To emphasize the absolute supremacy of this knowledge, Krishna employs two of the most striking metaphors in the entire Gita in verses 36 and 37. The first is the metaphor of the boat. He tells Arjuna, even if you are the most sinful of all sinners, you will cross over all wickedness by the boat of knowledge alone.
That is a staggering promise. It directly addresses the paralyzing guilt that halts so many spiritual journeys. We all have profound regrets. We all have actions in our past that we are deeply ashamed of.
Right. The text describes this accumulated burden as an anchor dragging us down into samsara, the terrifying, turbulent ocean of transmigration and suffering.
How does mere knowledge act as a boat?
Because this isn't intellectual knowledge. It is existential realization. When you truly realize that you are the untouched screen, you realize that the Atman never committed those sins.
The sins were committed by the ego, by the anatma, operating in a state of deep ignorance.
The moment you shift your identification from the flawed ego to the pure witnessing consciousness, the guilt loses its binding power. The boat of knowledge is unsinkable because the truth of your nature cannot be tainted by the actions of the physical body.
It carries you across the ocean of suffering, regardless of how heavy your past appears to be.
The second metaphor is even more aggressive, and it brings us to the mechanics of karma. In verse 37, Krishna says, just as a blazing fire reduces firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge reduce all karma to ashes.
This requires us to understand the concept of sanchita karma. Over countless lifetimes functioning in ignorance, we have accumulated an unfathomable reservoir of past actions that have yet to bear fruit.
This vast warehouse of pending karma is what dictates our future births, our future suffering, and our future limitations.
The traditional commentaries compare this mountain of sanchita karma to a mountain of cotton. Imagine a pile of highly flammable cotton the size of Mount Everest. That represents your millions of lifetimes of accrued actions.
You could try to dismantle that mountain by picking away at it one piece of cotton at a time, which is what we do when we try to burn off karma through experiencing its results.
It will take an eternity.
But what happens when you introduce fire?
You strike a single match, the spark of absolute self-knowledge. You throw that spark into the mountain of cotton, and in seconds, the entire mass is incinerated in a blazing conflagration. It is reduced to ash.
The realization that I am not the doer retroactively destroys the entire backlog of karma because the entity that supposedly accumulated the karma, the limited ego, is recognized as a fiction.
Now we have to pause here and address a highly nuanced and vital implication of this fire. It doesn't just burn up the bad karma, the sins and the wicked deeds. The fire of knowledge ruthlessly incinerates your good karma as well. The merits, the charity, the pious acts.
I can hear the listener protesting. Wait, why on earth would I want to destroy my good karma? Doesn't good karma guarantee a better next life? Doesn't it lead to heavenly realms, health and prosperity?
This is where Swami Vivekananda's concept of the chains of gold becomes essential. If you live a life of cruelty, selfishness, and violence, you are bound to the cycle of rebirth by heavy, painful iron chains. You will suffer.
But if you live a highly virtuous life, performing good deeds, with a subtle desire for reward, hoping for recognition or a place in heaven or a prosperous rebirth, you generate massive merit. And that merit will indeed pull you into higher states of existence.
But what?
But you are still bound. You have simply replaced your iron chains with chains of solid gold. They're much prettier, they're more comfortable, but they are still chains.
They still tether you to the illusion of being a limited, finite individual seeking temporary experiences. And the fundamental flaw of all relative realms, even the highest heavenly realms, is that they are temporary.
When your bank account of good karma runs dry, you fall right back down into the grinding cycle of human existence.
The fire of knowledge doesn't discriminate. It burns the iron chains and it melts the golden chains. It grants absolute unconditional liberation. You aren't just getting a better seat in the movie theater, you are walking out of the theater entirely and realizing you are the light itself.
With the absolute supremacy of this knowledge established the final section of our deep dive, and the closing verses of Chapter 4 must address the practical reality. How do we actually acquire this knowledge? How do we strike that match?
Krishna is very pragmatic here. He lays out the prerequisites both outward and inward. In verse 34, he gives the external protocol. He says you must approach a realized teacher, and you must approach them with a specific triad of behaviors: prostration, inquiry, and service.
Let's unpack those, because prostration can sound off-putting to a modern audience. It isn't about physical subjugation. It represents a psychological posture of profound humility and receptivity.
You cannot pour water into a cup that is already full, and you cannot teach your mind that is arrogant and believes it already knows the answers. The humility opens the channel.
But importantly, humility doesn't mean turning off your brain. The second requirement is critical inquiry. You are expected to ask probing, relentless questions. You have to wrestle with the philosophy.
And the third is service to the teacher, which creates a bond of trust and intimacy required for the transmission of subtle truths.
But the external teacher can only point the way. The inward prerequisites, detailed in verse 39, are where the actual transformation happens. Krishna lists 3 absolute necessities. The first and most critical is Shraddha.
Shraddha is often weakly translated as faith, which in a modern context usually implies a blind, unreasoning belief in a dogma. But that isn't what Krishna is demanding, is it?
Not at all. Shraddha is better understood as a working conviction. It is a deep, intuitive trust that the scriptures and the teacher are pointing toward a reality that you can empirically verify for yourself through practice.
It is the hypothesis of a scientist. A scientist has Shraddha that the laws of physics are consistent and that conviction fuels their years of arduous experimentation.
The second inward requirement is the control of the senses. You can have all the conviction in the world, but if your attention is constantly hijacked by every passing desire, every notification on your phone, every sensory impulse, you will never achieve the depth of focus required to penetrate the illusion of the ego.
And the third is an unswerving, dedicated focus on the goal. It must become the primary organizing principle of your life. If you possess these 3 convictions, sensory, discipline, and focus, Krishna promises that you will inevitably attain this knowledge and that supreme peace will immediately follow.
But he also issues a severe warning about the psychological poison that destroys Shraddha. In verse 40, he warns of the danger of doubt. He says the ignorant, the faithless, the doubting soul perishes. For the doubting soul there is neither this world, nor the world beyond, nor any happiness.
Those are incredibly stark words. And we must be meticulously clear about what kind of doubt he is condemning here. He is not condemning the critical inquiry he literally just mandated in verse 34. Questioning a specific doctrine or struggling to understand a concept is healthy.
So what is the toxic doubt?
He is talking about a pervasive, corrosive cynicism. It is an existential doubt where you fundamentally disbelieve in the very possibility of higher truth.
It is the voice that says enlightenment is a myth. Everyone is secretly selfish. The spiritual path is just a psychological cope for people who can't handle reality. There is no ultimate peace.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you hold that kind of deep-seated cynicism, you paralyze yourself. You will never commit the energy required to practice the disciplines. You block yourself from the path entirely.
And as Krishna points out, that level of cynicism doesn't just ruin your spiritual prospects, it ruins your worldly life as well. You won't find happiness in this world because that toxic doubt poisons your relationships, your career, and your daily interactions. You become trapped in a bitter, isolated ego.
Which brings us to the breathtaking climax of Chapter 4. In the final verse, verse 42, Krishna pulls all of these massive theological and philosophical threads together and delivers his final marching orders to Arjuna. He says, therefore, with the sword of knowledge, cut asunder the doubt born of ignorance that resides in your heart.
The sword of knowledge. It is a brilliant, active metaphor. This knowledge isn't a soft, passive, comforting thought. It's a weapon.
It is forged in the fires of discipline, sharpened by the intellect, and wielded by conviction. And its sole purpose is to violently sever the final knot of ignorance, the illusion that you are a vulnerable, finite, separate entity.
And once you have severed that knot, what do? Does Krishna tell Arjuna, now that you realize you are the infinite, untouched Brahman, drop your weapons, abandon the battlefield, and go find a quiet cave to meditate?
No. He issues the ultimate call to action. He says, established in yoga, stand up and fight.
Stand up and engage. For Arjuna, that meant physically standing up in his chariot to participate in a devastating, necessary historical war.
But for you listening right now, the battlefield is your own life. It means standing up to face the complexities of your career. It means fiercely honoring your commitments to your family. It means engaging with the political and social struggles of your community.
But you do it fundamentally transformed.
Exactly. You do it not by running away into false renunciation and not by getting completely tangled up in the anxiety, ambition, and heartbreak of the not-self. You engage with the world at absolute maximum intensity, armed with the sword of self-knowledge, anchored in an unshakable, silent inner peace.
You dive into the chaotic, raging movie of life, knowing with absolute certainty that you are the untouched, unburned, unbroken screen.
It is the ultimate blueprint for living a life of maximum impact with zero internal friction.
What a profound place to land.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over as you transition back into your day. Swami Vivekananda once told a story about a little drop of water. It falls from a rain cloud and hurtles down toward the vast, terrifying ocean. As it gets closer, it begins to weep. It laments, "Oh no, I am going to lose my boundaries. I'm losing my personality. I am disappearing."
But the ocean looks up and simply laughs. It says, little drop, you aren't dying. You're becoming the ocean. You are the ocean now.
As you go back to your busy life, ask yourself, what if the limits you are so desperately afraid of losing are the exact things keeping you from realizing how vast you truly are?
Thank you for listening all the way to the end.
If this message was helpful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us and helps us continue creating content like this.
And if you believe this message could help someone you know, please don't forget to share it with them.
We also really appreciate your honest feedback.
In the comments, tell us.
What are we doing right? And what should we improve for future videos?
Thank you again for being here. We'll see you in the next one.